Our next speaker is Marije Vogelzang. Thankfully, she made it here because there was weather in Europe. And thankfully, she is quick to point out that she's not a food designer, but an eating designer. Food is already perfectly designed by nature, she reminds us, and you put my designs inside of your body. Unlike other design under discussion today, Marije's is edible, therefore ephemeral. Food goes to the stomach, but like all design, she says, it can also activate the brain and cause memories and emotions. And since, as she points out, everybody eats food, everybody understands and has a relation to food, food connects us to culture, to society, to nature, to feeling. It was at Eindhoven that Marije began pondering food's design potential. Reeling against her and just about everyone's childhood programming, it was time for Marije to play with food, which then became her life's work. And much of Marije's design philosophy is recorded in her book, Eat Love. Fortunately, we have Marije here today to talk to us about her faked meat project and her vegetarian animal inventions, and how far the average pineapple travels and what it is like to be hand-fed by Hungarian gypsies. Marije, can I ask you at the start exactly when and how did you arrive at the decision to pursue or to create, actually, the category of eating design?
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Well, it's kind of interesting. I think 12 years ago, I was still a student at the Design Academy in Eindhoven. And there you saw that everybody was really busy in making designs for humans, because that's what we do. So we design chairs to sit on, cars to drive in, tables to eat from, and houses to live in. But what we really need to live, to be able not to die, is food. But for some reason, food was not a subject for design 12 years ago. It just didn't exist. So every day I went to school, I went to all the workshops, I was trying to find my perfect material. So I did things with plastics, I did things with wood, I did things with ceramics. Every day I went home to cook dinner, and I looked at my kitchen and I thought, well, this is a kind of workshop too. And I opened my cupboards and I thought, well, these are materials too, my ingredients. So why not make designs with this? And then, as you just said, if you're a designer and you start to work with food, you might think you're a food designer. But that would imply that I would actually design food. And I think food is perfectly designed by nature. I don't need to change anything about a pepper or anything else. But what I think is much more interesting is to look at the verb of eating. And then if you start to look at that, you start to open a whole new universe, connecting every human being, because we all need to eat. We all need to feed ourselves physically, but also emotionally. So my work is inspired by all the things that surround the act of eating. This is not a chronological story, but this is the first project I did with food. I started to work on the idea of the color white, and in many cultures, white is the color of death. And in Western society, the color of death is black. So in Holland, when we go to a funeral, we wear black and we go there. And we don't really have a lot of rituals around death. So we just get a slice of sponge cake, or if we're lucky, we get a roll with cheese. And that's it. So Dutch people don't really have a lot of rituals around mourning culture. But in many cultures, the color of death is white. And in many cultures, food is a very important part of the departing process, which kind of makes sense because it's also comforting. Eating food and sharing food together, it's an act of comfort. So I made this completely white funeral dinner as a kind of alternative for all these poor Dutch people that don't have any rituals. And all the ingredients of this dinner are naturally white. And I'm not a chef, I'm not trained as a chef. I just like to play with food, as you just said. But I didn't really know what to do with it. I just started to prepare this food very simply, very pure. And I found out that actually all these white-colored food combined very well together. The colors, the flavors are very subtle, but also very strong and sharp and bitter. So in a way, it also reflects the feeling that you have when you are at a funeral very well. I have been working on this subject now for over 12 years. And every year people kept asking me to do a Christmas dinner. And I thought, well, you know, what can you do with a Christmas dinner? It's already overly designed in so many ways. What can a designer add to that? But then when Drew asked me to do a Christmas dinner, I thought, well, what is Christmas really about in essence? And I think it's about sharing and being together and feeling connected to each other, if you look at this besides the story of Jesus Christ. So when you just think about these things, then you can make a very simple intervention. I just took a table with normally the tablecloth hangs down to the floor, and now I took it up into the air and I made some slits in it, and that's it, very easy. So this is the situation. And there were 40 people that didn't know each other that were attending this dinner, and they were sitting like this in the tablecloth. So it's a strange situation. You're sitting somewhere with your head and your hands inside some space, and the rest of your body is outside. I had some reasons to do this. First of all, you're physically connected to each other. If I pull here, you can feel it there. Also, it's a kind of communist idea that you become more equal when you don't see your clothes, because your clothes reveal parts of your identity. So it suddenly becomes like one. Everybody is more the same. And the last thing is also that if you put lots of people in a funny situation, then you kind of start to bond immediately. So this is maybe even nicer to see the bags if you have to go to the bathroom during dinner. The first one was in Amsterdam, this one was in Tokyo, in Japan, and I was really scared that people wouldn't want to participate in my design. Because when people arrive, everybody was behaving very formal and bowing and handing over business cards. And I thought, oh my God, I think they're not going to want to do this. But once they sat down and put their heads through the tablecloth, it was as if their masks were falling off. People were becoming very playful and very communicative and very sociable, which was a very interesting transaction to see. So, of course, it's not only the setting, it's really also about the food. But this also shows that I'm not a food designer, because you can see that this lady, she just has melon. It's just plain ripe melon. But you can see that her plate is cut in two. Everybody on her side of the table has the same dish. Everybody opposite of her has ham. Well, ham and melon is such a classical combination. You don't need to tell people what to do. People will just start to share their food naturally. That's what we like to do as human beings. We just start to share. The main course was the same idea. The first person would get a huge piece of rib. The second person would get a whole pumpkin stuffed with seeds and nuts and everything from the oven. The third person would get a complete lettuce. It would be clean, but it would have croutons and dressing and everything on top. And the last person would get the potatoes. And people just start to share this, start to cut things up, make a big mess, and be very happy together. This is a very small project, but it's very dear to me. It's a project I did in Rotterdam for the Historical Museum, and they had an exhibition about the Second World War. You might not know that Rotterdam has been severely bombed during the Second World War, and at the end of the war they had a time of starvation. So there was no food anymore, and people had to live from the scarcity that they had. They were eating tulip bulbs that they got from the ground. And what I did for this exhibition is I made first I collected recipes from the Resistance Museum, just handwritten recipes, and I prepared them very simply. I didn't change anything about it, but I made them into small snacks. And when you would enter, you would get a little coupon. And with the coupon, you would get some surrogate coffee. And with the surrogate coffee, you would get your ration of food, so your ration of little snacks. What happened there is that some people that were there were children during the time of war. They didn't have these flavors in their mouth for more than 65 years. And I think this really relates to what you have been talking about. They got back memories of the time that they were children, that they were there with their parents that were still alive, eating the food that they were eating back then, and having memories that they thought they were forgotten about, but suddenly they came back, and they were very dear to them. They were very painful memories, but also very beautiful ones. And for me, this really is the project that pointed out to me that as a designer, you can choose any material to work with. But there's just one material that enters your body, that becomes a part of your body, and that is as emotional as food is. And this makes me very grateful to work on this.
And Marije, something just occurred to me, that this eating design where everything goes through, it's also, in this particular project of yours, a cathartic, a sensorial experience. Yes, there is the remembrance from olfactive stimuli. Yes, there is taste. Yes, there is even sight that you're working with as well to create an amalgam experience ultimately as your result. So please go on.
Thanks. So I'm really inspired by daily life, by just normal, average things. And of course, food is the thing that we do every day. So for me, that's the great subject. I love to go to supermarkets, and right now we have this thing going on with vegetarian alternatives. So next to the meat aisle, we have this ever-growing aisle, because it's really an emerging market to make substitutes for the vegetarian market. So it's fake meat, what we see. Many times it's made from soy as a base product. And what I'm really puzzled about is that when you don't want to eat meat and you want to buy a vegetarian alternative, why does this look like meat? Because we can get vegetarian balls, we can get vegetarian schnitzel, vegetarian burgers, vegetarian minced, vegetarian sausage. But if you don't have an animal with guts, why would you want to make a sausage in a sausage shape? It doesn't make sense to me. And if you make a vegetarian alternative from this kind of shapeless soy protein product, you can make any shape. Why don't we just invent new animals? So what you see here is the herbast. This is a small animal, it's like this big. It lives in the herbal fields of Albania, where it runs through the fields. And it has to be secure not to be eaten by other animals. So it's covered with a fur made of herbs for protection and for camouflage. And because the fur is already made from herbs, you can just put the stir-fried chops in your pan and it's already pre-seasoned and you don't have to add any herbs as a seasoning. Also, this animal is square-shaped, which is really convenient for packaging, transport, and at the table everybody gets an equal share. This is the ponti. This is a small rodent-like animal that lives in empty volcanoes in Haiti. And this animal eats the ashes from the volcanoes, and therefore the taste of the meat is lightly smoked. Also, this animal has a very firm tail because it needs to make burrow in these magma layers. And because it has this firm tail, it's a great party snack because you can just pick it up by the tail and have clean hands. This is the ponti from up close. And this is the bikyo. This is a vegetarian fish. It lives in the shallow waters of Japan, where it feeds itself on the seaweed that grows there. And because it eats a lot of seaweed, it has a very high level of antioxidants, which the real connoisseur can see by the green stripes that it has in the meat. Because it's aesthetically attractive as well, you can use it for sushi and sashimi and these kinds of ways of preparing. This is how it looks like in the supermarket. And this is the last animal. This is a bird. It's called the sapiku, and it lives in Canada, where it lives in the maple trees and it feeds itself of the sap of the trees, and therefore the taste of the meat is naturally sweet. So it's a dessert meat, and it goes very well with ice cream and chocolate. This is the making of the meat. These were prototypes. We made them for marzipan because in Holland we have a very big tradition on making marzipan meat. Well, we just make pigs actually. But I have been working now with a producer of vegetarian alternative products. So they just make this kind of shapeless stuff. And we have been making the ponti. And I did an exhibition where for the opening we were barbecuing the pontis. And some vegetarians didn't want to eat it because they didn't trust it was real, well, non-meat meat. And also someone told me that he had been Googling ponti because he thought it was a real animal, which I thought was quite a nice story.
So, Marije, I know you have a video to show us.
Yeah.
And would you like to set that up a little bit? And then I guess the rest will be
We're running out of time?
A little bit, yeah.
All right. I can just say one word with the next slides, okay? Marshmallow clouds made with real rainwater. Icebergs that melt in your hot chocolate for inner global warming. Sugar spoon melts in your tea, no dishes to do. A lollipop that shows what sugar does to your body. And well, this is a longer story, so this is my daughter who is really cute. Look at my cute daughter. I made her eat her vegetables by doing that. I was invited to do a project with gypsies in Hungary, and for me that was kind of weird because I had never been to Hungary and I had never met any gypsies. But for me, I was interested to consider them as any other minority group. And I was also interested in hand feeding because it's a very strange thing to do. You get fed by your mother when you're a child, and maybe when you grow up you get fed by your lover, but you never get fed by a stranger. Only maybe when you grow old again and you become disabled and then someone feeds you. But it's a very intimate act. You really have to trust someone.
Tell us about the project. You arrived in Hungary and...
You have to imagine it was a white space with 10 tables, small tables on extended legs, so they were quite high. And they were covered with tablecloth until the floor. And we were inviting people to sit underneath the table. Just as a child, you would sit underneath the table as you have your little tent. And then we had 10 gypsy ladies that would sit in front of you and would sit there and feed you the food, their own personal gypsy food, not very culinary special, just plain farmer's food.
And where did you find the gypsies?
It was actually through a lady that worked for the Dutch embassy, and she was in touch with a theater company that had some ladies working there. And when we started, we had these ladies, and I told them about the idea because I wanted them to feed you, but also tell their life story at the same time. So you would be given their food, but you would also hear their life story. So it's an intertwined storytelling and feeding situation. But I really had to find a way to make it accessible to be fed because it's such an intimate thing. It's very scary to be fed. It's very unpleasant. If you can make eye contact, then you really don't want to be fed by someone because you just think, oh, I have to smile, and you start to behave like you think you should behave. But I wanted you to really relax and undergo the situation. So that's why you're sitting in this tent and you can't see the woman who's feeding you. And I also did that because I didn't want you to know who it was that fed you. Because if you would see her, then you might think, oh yeah, I hate old gypsies, but she's nice. And now I wanted people to make the generalization that if you would walk down the street and see a gypsy lady walking there, then you might think, oh, maybe it's her, or maybe it's her brother. It's Immanuel Kant that said, if you break bread with each other, you can't break each other's neck. So I was thinking from the ideas that once you are fed by someone, you have to like this person. You cannot hate someone that fed you. That's the starting point of this idea.
And the food itself, what did you have the gypsies feeding people?
It was really simple. Some woman, she had memories of oranges, so she was just feeding oranges, or just some bread with some grease, some I think it's just pork fat. It's really simple food.
So Roma recipes didn't really come into it.
Yeah, but it's like the basic Roma food.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was really more about an encounter that gets transferred through the act of feeding and then the swallowing, once again, of the material going through your body to create this cathartic emotional experience.
Yeah, what happened was that most people that undergo the performance were very touched. Some came out crying. It was a very emotional event. And the most left-wing newspaper and the most right-wing newspaper started to write about it and started to make the debate again about gypsy integration in society. And I didn't intend this to happen, but they started to write about it in a more human way because of this project, which I was really happy about.
And the gypsies, how did they do?
That was very nice because when we started, they said, yeah, I don't know who is going to be interested in my story because every day they are being discriminated, every day they are being rejected. So they really didn't think that people would be interested. But in this setting, in this very intimate setting, people were very interested and wanted to hear more. And some of them said, yeah, it was too short. I want to know who this person is. I want to see who she is. And so it was very nice to see that they also grew because normally gypsies are the ones that are being given things. So they get charity, they get pity, they get discrimination. So they are the receiving party. But now they were the giving party. They were very strong giving their stories and giving their food. And that really made them grow. You really could see them, you could see them growing. And that was really very strong.
Well, Marije, I know you're disappointed about the video,
Yes.
so am I, but it is on your website.
It is, yeah.
Is that correct? And could you just say the address now so people can look it up?
Yeah, it's marijevogelzang.com. So it's just my name. Oh, .nl, sorry. .nl. It's my name. You can see it in the papers.
.nl for the Netherlands.
.nl, yes.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.